Good morning, and welcome to First Parish in Framingham. Welcome if this is your first time in joining us, and welcome back if this is your community. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate and welcome people of all ages, races, gender identities, sexual orientations, abilities, socioeconomic statuses, or beliefs. We welcome you here in the meeting house or on Zoom or wherever and whenever you may be watching this service in the future. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. I'm David Ortmeyer. I use he, his pronouns. I'm on the Board of Assessors, and I am your worship associate this morning, along with my wife, Deborah. This morning's service was planned and written by Reverend Aaron Stockwell-Wiseman, but he is currently on the tail end of recovering from COVID. So I and Deb will read today's service in his stead. But Reverend Aaron is joining us on Zoom. And welcome to all of our Zoom participants. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religion that honors wisdom from many sources. We keep our minds open to the religious questions that people have pondered across vast times and places. And please be sure to read the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following worship, you are invited to join us for coffee hour in Scott Hall across the courtyard. And remember, today is a very special Sunday. It is Super Sunday. And that's a time when you can buy soup to help support the mission of this congregation. So soup will be on sale in Scott Hall. And now please take a moment to turn your phones or other devices to their quietest settings. While beeps and buzzes can be distracting, we welcome your human noises, cooing or babbling or laughter and all. We especially love the sound of your singing, so please join in. And since 1701, people have gathered as this community to rest or recharge, to be challenged or affirmed, and these people are like you. You belong here. Maybe for the next hour, but we hope for longer, and we're really happy to have you with us. So now I now invite you to take a deep breath in and out. Continue to take a few more deep breaths and begin to release whatever you need to let go of to be more fully present to yourself, to one another, and the sacred in this time and place. A flame within a chalice is a primary symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. To symbolize the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope, it is our tradition to begin our worship by kindling the flame of our chalice. Tracy Johnson writes, "We kindle our chalice flame this morning, awakening the fire of our ancestors in our hearts. Beacon of freedom held out to light the way, light of reason illuminating the path, spark of courage igniting our spirits, aglow with hope for all we endeavor to do together. Holy flame of times past, brighten this present moment, that we may be the love that is our center and our foundation. Both. Blessed be." So now, please rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 114 in the Gray Hymn Book, Forward Through the Ages, and then please remain standing for the sung and spoken affirmations after that. grows the vision, realm of love and light. Forward we must labor, for faith is sight. Prophets have proclaimed it, martyrs testify. Poets sung its glory, heroes for it died. Forward through the ages, in unbroken line, move the faithful spirit at the call divine. We conquer, not alone we fall. With the triumph fall. Bound by God's purpose, in one working whole, move we on together to the shining goal. Forward through the ages, in unbroken line, move the faithful spirit at the call divine. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. Dwell together in peace. Seek knowledge and freedom. Serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Please be seated.
Once upon a time, newsgirl Lauren came striding through the quiet village of Framingham with exciting news. Extra, extra, read all about it. The jet pig is coming to Framingham. And all the people turned to each other and said, "What's a jet pig? Who's a jet pig? Where's the jet pig? What's a jet pig?" Let me introduce to you the jet pig. This is J. Piglet, the jet pig. J. Piglet, the jet pig, is powered by love. And let's see, first of all, yep, there's no fuel in there. It's empty. So we're going to power him up with love. Let's see. There we go. All right. Now the jet pig, J. Piglet, is ready to fly through the sky, and what he's going to do is seed the clouds with some fantastic big ideas. Big ideas like justice. Turn it around. There we go. Equity. It's got equity. There we go. Transformation. Gotta keep them up. Pluralism. Interdependence. And generosity. All right, and now, guess what those beautiful clouds are going to do? They are going to rain. And they're going to rain all those beautiful ideas powered by love down on the land. And guess what's going to grow? Let's have those flowers. Hold them up. Here are the flowers of the values that are proposed as our upcoming, hopefully, Article 2, right? So J, justice, E, equity, T, transformation, P, pluralism, I, interdependence, G, generosity. So that's many religious educators have been remembering those values by using the jet pig. And I thought it was time to bring J Piglet to you all. And now, the children and teachers and I will all head on over to religious exploration. Please sing them out.
So we will now move on to our moment of sharing. Dr. Vivek Murphy writes, "It is a world where we respect and value one another, where we look out for one another, and where we create opportunities to uplift one another. A world where our highs are higher because we celebrate them together, where our lows are more manageable because we respond to them together, and where our recovery is faster because we grieve and rebuild together. Thus, we set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and concerns which are now shaping our lives." Just a reminder that you can submit your joys and sorrows either online or by writing them down in this book that is normally at the back of the sanctuary. I've just lost its pencil, but we'll get that back. After our final candle is lit, we will sing the 2 verses of There Is Love, which are in your order of service. Okay, so so we will start with our joys. Our first joy is, I had the opportunity to go, this is from Kevin, I had the opportunity to go to a wonderful choral concert last night and to another this afternoon. Music is one of the great joys of my life. And we did not have any that were submitted online, and I don't see any more in here. So we will light one final candle for all those joys and sorrows which are too tender to be expressed. Let us now sing There Is a Love in your order of service. I invite you to take a few more comfortable breaths to center yourself. The words for our time for contemplation are written by the Reverend Douglas Taylor. Gracious and loving God, from whom all things come and to whom all things return, we gather on the edge of another week, and for some of us, on the edge of our strength. We come buoyed by events of our week, or weighed down by them, or we arrive in some paradoxical mix thereof. We are here in our Sunday assembly of hope and restoration. At times we come weary and worn down, and for some, that is how we arrive today. At other times, we come with questions, with a longing, or with something to offer. But for those who come today, shattered, broken, lonely, and lost, let us offer our prayer of resilience. Again, this week, we test the tender places in our hearts and in our lives to see what healing may occur. Gratitude is often a source of healing. We give thanks for the landscapes of grace in our lives, for music and for good companions, for the guidance of great principles and the examples of integrity all around us. We give thanks for all that lifts us up and for lessons that lead us on. For the times when we are brought low by anxiety or adversity, show us the hidden wells of love that we can tap into. Help us rise up once more, just once more, and once more again will surely be enough. Remind us that we do not strive in vain, that we are part of a chorus, that resilience is in our bones, and that peace will prevail on earth, and that healing and grace come like soft rain. Be thou an ever-present strength upon our journeys, and teach us that in falling down, we do rise again. This we ask in the name of all that is holy. May it be so. Let us sit in the quiet of this space for a few moments longer. I'll keep track of the time.
Ellen Johnson Fay writes, "The offering is a sacrament of the free church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values."
You know, I've always wanted to stand in the preacher crusher. David and I flipped for it, and I won. In today's sermon, we share the top 9 religious news stories. Reverend Aaron started by reading the most popular stories by readership from the religious news services, as well as the thoughts of a religious journalist with the Deseret News in Salt Lake City. And then he added a few stories that he thought were personally important. These are shared in no particular order. He shares these stories because he thought it was essential to connect with what the rest of the world is talking about when it comes to religion. Some of these stories reference national or global political events, which it is still the duty of ministers to speak about. Many famous preachers, including Reinhold Niebuhr, have said over the years, you need to preach with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. From here on, in this sermon, we will use the first-person pronoun instead of the third-person pronoun, which you, the listener, should assume is Reverend Aaron. He started this sermon before he tested positive for COVID on Monday. Oh, and also, yes, the sermon was titled The Top 10 Religious News Stories, but the sermon was just getting too long for all 10, so it's just 9. News story number 1. The first most important news story of 2023 is the effects of the war between the Israeli government and Hamas in Gaza. This war has been a delicate issue as the solution seems intractable. Our denomination, along with the heads of several other churches, called for a ceasefire. I do not want civilians, either Israelis or Palestinians, to be killed. The loss of life is appalling. The destruction of sacred sites, natural sites, schools, and hospitals is as well. As I follow the news, I'm shocked at the amount of disinformation I see, especially on social media. With almost any fact and figure I see about the war in Gaza, I have learned that some part of those figures were wrong. And while there is a lot to report on this human catastrophe abroad, what is also terrible is the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia here in the United States. As Kelsey Dulles of the Deseret News writes, anti-Semitic incidents have become more common since Hamas' surprise attack on Israel on October 7th prompted the Israel Defense Forces to launch their counterattacks in Gaza. The Anti-Defamation League reported, from October 7th through November 20th, the ADL Center on Extremism documented 1,402 anti-Semitic incidents, including at least 280 on college campuses across the United States. This represents a 315% increase from the 338 incidents reported during the same time frame in 2022. Over Thanksgiving, in Burlington, Vermont, 3 Palestinian college students were shot by a white man. 2 survivors were US citizens, and the other was a legal US resident. They were speaking Arabic at the time they were shot. This shooting is one example of Islamophobia. Even the FBI has been tracking both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic threats. FBI Director Christopher Wray recently said, I've never seen a time where all the threats are so many different threats all elevated all at exactly the same time. That's what makes this environment that we are in now so fraught. Important news story number 2. The next religious news story of 2023 is the ongoing departure of conservative Methodist churches from the United Methodist Church, the largest Methodist denomination in the United States. This split has largely been over the ordination of LGBTQ candidates for the ministry. Recently, there was a shift that would allow LGBTQ plus Methodist ministers to serve openly. Methodists use a different policy than we do in our denomination, where all decisions are made on a congregation by congregation basis. Methodists operate on an appointment-based system where ministers are sent to congregations by a bishop. At this point, over 7,659 churches have chosen disaffiliation. This choice to disaffiliate is incredibly challenging because the denomination owns the church property in Methodism. They must vote to buy the church back, provided insurance and other documents are in order. This topic was a big breakfast and dinner conversation amongst the chaplaincy at the National Scout Jamboree in West Virginia, where I volunteered on chaplaincy staff this past summer. There were a fair number of Methodist pastors volunteering alongside me. While most of them were retiring, most said they would have supported their congregations leaving the United Methodist Church over this issue, with the new denomination being formed called the Global Methodist Church. My sense of the argument from some conversations with the United Methodists is that the churches did not want to have a gay minister forced on them. I would not want my sibling clergy to serve a congregation that did not support and love all of their humanity. I recognize that there are probably other nuances in this denominational split that I am not fully appreciating as a cisgender heterosexual male minister in a different denomination. Still, nonetheless, it feels important to lift this up. It does not appear that many United Methodist churches in the New England area chose disaffiliation. Important news story number 3. Another ongoing news topic is the continuing rise of Christian nationalism, especially with the election of Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House on October 25th. Christian nationalists have been elected to other lower offices as well. Mike Johnson is a conservative evangelical representing this faction's political influence reaching its apex. Christian nationalism is, in a nutshell, a movement that believes that Christianity defines the American nation and that the U.S. government should take active steps to establish Christianity as the national religion. In a Religion News Service article by Paul O'Donnell, we are reminded that Johnson is unabashed about expressing his faith in political contexts, telling the House in his first speech as Speaker, "I believe that Scripture, the Bible, is very clear, that God is the one who raises those in authority." Important news story number 4. Our next news story is a lower stakes news story, but it is still significant. A blog post went viral over the Labor Day weekend, written by Reverend Alexander Lang, who was resigning from the pastorate of a large Presbyterian church in the Midwest, titled "Departure: Why I Left the Church." He described his reasons for resigning, some of which made my head nod with vigorous agreement. The scope of this job? Unrealistic expectations about the role of the minister? The challenge of having a number of bosses similar to the number of people in your congregation. Reverend Lang's piece is one of many articles highlighting the issue of clergy burnout and mental health. The pandemic indeed increased it, but there is now a shortage of clergy willing to serve congregations in our denomination. Over the last 3 years, there has been a significant increase in mid-year ministerial resignations in our denomination. These two facts combined mean that now, when a minister leaves their congregation, that congregation might not have a minister to serve either as an interim minister or as a settled minister. Our denomination's president, Sophia Betancourt, wisely said, "We actually have a parish ministry crisis, not a clergy shortage. We see it as a clergy shortage, but that's only half of the picture. Some clergy are no longer willing to serve congregations because of the stress that congregational ministry puts on their lives."
Story number 5. Our next news story is a fascinating one that took place over 2 weeks, from February 8th to February 23rd, 2023. There was a religious revival at Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky. It began after a regularly scheduled campus chapel service, and then several students stuck around and continued to pray and worship together. The service did not end for 2 weeks. With the power of social media, word spread quickly, and people worldwide flocked to see this revival, which others called the Asbury Outpouring. Eventually, this led to safety concerns, with the university's president saying, "As we enter the 3rd week of this renewal movement, we desire to be faithful to our mission as a student-centric Christian university." What was so unique about this is the style of it. There were no flashing lights, fog machines, or other things that accompany many modern worship services, one religious news service article pointed out. Especially in an age where we wonder how we will attract Generation Z, the generation born in the late 1990s to the early 2010s, this revival did not have the flashy trimmings and trappings. That's why I think it deserves mention in this service. There are so many articles published about how Generation Z is not going to church or taking part in any religious community. And here we have an example of Generation Z having a spiritual experience. Michael McKinsey, a professor of religion and philosophy, explains the grassroots nature of these revivals. They stress a personal experience of God and a return to the basics of Christianity. Revivals often happen when people felt things had gone wrong and were trying to recapture something that was lost. Mackenzie closes by saying, "They often bypass leaders and they start from the grassroots. That makes them harder to predict or control. They can also be a way of separating spiritual experience from the baggage of organized religion." Number 6. Another news story that caught the attention of reporters affiliated with the religion news service was the expulsion of key churches from the Southern Baptist Convention. At the annual meeting in June, delegates voted to expel 5 churches for employing women as pastors after a ban on women pastors was passed in 2000. Before June, no other churches had been removed. Bob Smitten writes, "Southern Baptists have long disagreed over just about everything, from the role of women in the church and which Bible is best to debate over Calvinism and alien immersions, that is, whether people who were baptized outside the denomination can be church members. But despite their disagreements, joining the Southern Baptist Convention has historically been relatively easy, and getting kicked out was difficult. And yet, that's what happened." There's much more to the story, but those are the highlights. Story number 7. Our next story is one from our denomination. The Article 2 revision of our denomination's bylaws passed the threshold to be studied another year. As you hopefully know, we are in a bylaws mandated period of our denomination's values. What we currently refer to as the principles, purposes, and sources of our living tradition are enshrined in Article 2. Every 15 years, we must revisit the words we use to describe our values. A revision did not meet the voting threshold for further study in 2009. There have also been minor changes, such as when our 7th principle was added in 1997, or when the 6th source was added around the same time. But mostly, our principles have stood as written since 1985. The most substantive change is changing our principles into values. The revisions suggest that love is the center of our religion, with other values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, inclusion, and generosity. I believe the need to change and the desire to change represents who we are as a religious tradition. We describe ourselves as a living tradition, and this is one way to embody that definition: to be intentional about reviewing the things that we hold most dear, and to embark carefully on substantive changes. The Article 2 revision process is a 2-year process. At General Assembly in 2023 in Pittsburgh, the revisions passed the first threshold, with over 86% voting for more study. This year, it will also need to pass with 3/4 majority at a virtual General Assembly. I, for one, have been pleased with the level of intentionality in this study and this revision. It is good to have Unitarian Universalists discuss the values that are important to us. Story number 8. We now move to another story of a religion studying possible changes. From October 4th through the 29th, an assembly convened by Pope Francis at the Vatican, called the Synod on Synodality, discussed issues of importance to the Catholic Church. A Catholic news agency article by Hannah Brockhaus explains that the result of this conference was a document that included, quote, the discussion of several hot-button issues that it calls controversial. The idea of women deacons, optional priestly celibacy, and the accompaniment of people struggling with their gender or sexual identity. There is a request for the next session of the Synod on Synodality to explore the possibility of women deacons. What is notable about this synod is that it is the first time lay people, including women, took part in the vote of this final document. The voting process was painstaking. It was a 42-page report, and each paragraph needed a 2/3 majority to be included in the final document. It's not clear what Roman Catholics in local parishes on the ground are thinking about this document. I look forward to hearing about the October 2024 meeting. And finally, number 9. I end with the election of the Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt as the 10th president of our Unitarian Universalist Association in June at our General Assembly. President Betancourt is the second woman and the third person of color elected as our denomination's president. She is the first queer person to be elected. President Betancourt did serve for 10 weeks as an interim co-president in 2017 after Peter Morales' resignation. As you may be aware, 7 or 8 years ago, our denomination changed the process for electing president. A presidential search committee is now charged with naming 2 presidential candidates. Others can run on a nomination process where they qualify for the ballot by getting a certain number of congregations to approve their run. Interestingly, there was another candidate, but they decided to defer to Dr. Betancourt. And even after being announced as their sole candidate, she still held campaign events so that people could speak to her about the issues that they cared the most about. President Betancourt is first and foremost a theologian. She's outright that she does not have a plan for numerical growth, but I do think that her presidency will coincide with spiritual depth. With the election of any denominational president, it is essential to remember that our congregations are operated at the local level, and there are no mandates. Only resources and vision casting come from the top. The president serves not as the Pope, but as head of staff of the employees of the UUA, the chief spokesperson, and the minister at large. I will be curious to see how things unfold. I am hopeful. It is heartwarming to note that Betancourt has other sisters in this endeavor of denominational leadership as a female minister of color in the United Church of Christ, the American Baptist Churches, the Disciples of Christ Christian Church, and the United Methodist Church. So that's it. These are the 9 top religious news stories of 2023. And Reverend Aaron especially thanks David Ortmeyer and Deb Dubois here. He wrote this, I'm not just saying that, for reading this sermon. So now, please rise and body your spirit to sing our closing hymn. It is number 1064 in the Teal Book, Blue Boat Home. And then please remain standing for the benediction. Our benediction words come from the Reverend Barbara Hamilton Holway. Go now in peace, deeply regard each other, truly listen to each other, speak what each of you must speak. Be ready in any moment to disarm your own heart, and always live as if a realm of love had begun. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.